Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 104 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, alongside Colton Dodgson, and we are coming at you after a 10-point Sun Devil win in the Little Apple. ASU beats Kansas State 24-14, takes a 24-0 lead, and now finds itself second in the Big 12 standings at 5-2, 8-2 overall, which lands them at number 21 in the college football playoff poll. Colton, how's it going?
I'm back in that mode now where I'm like excited for ASU games, right? And I've been feeling that, but it has evolved to a new feeling um that is pretty similar to like not being able to sleep, like too excited to sleep. Like
Yeah.
the last couple of nights I have been like, okay, I just need to fall asleep like three more times and then it's Saturday.
Yeah, dude.
Which it sounds um absurd, maybe. I don't know how people might describe that, but like this really is, and it's not lost on ASU fans. I'm not coming up with an original take here, but this really is the biggest ASU game in the last 10 years. And I think everybody is, I mean, obviously, man, look at the ticket prices. Like, I remember looking at those 3 weeks ago, thinking,
Yeah,
oh,
you
yeah,
should have
maybe
pulled the
they'll.
trigger,
I know they were like $70. I'm like, oh, hopefully they'll go down a little
which
bit.
is still, yeah, that's actually pretty
That's
high for
expensive for
3
an
weeks
ASU
out.
game. Before, I
Yeah,
mean, that was around the time they had just lost to Cincinnati. All this Big 12 stuff was like,
yeah,
I think at that point we were still looking for the sixth win, right? We were still looking for bowl eligibility.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah.
So at that point, it was like just get to a bowl game. Now we're talking Big 12 championship, and it's just, and not only like this isn't a scenario where you have to shock the world to get there either. You're favored.
No.
You're going to be favored in both of these games, right?
Yep.
And for all intents and purposes, I know there's some tiebreaker stuff that has to happen, but you essentially control your own destiny given the state of some of the tiebreakers, right? So
Yeah,
like
totally.
it's just it's kind of absurd to think that we're here. I know when we did our preseason predictions, I think you predicted 6-6. I predicted 7-5, thinking I was for sure going to be wrong. I was just trying to be a little more optimistic. I thought you had probably hit the nail on the head with 6-6.
I think I predicted
And
5-7 because I
oh,
wanted to
did you?
predict 6-6, and then I just bumped a win off just because I know that I'm a homer, right? Like I know
Right, right.
I guess by doing that, maybe I'm not a homer, right? I guess if you can
You
acknowledge your
tried to,
homerness, then you might
yeah,
not
you tried to conceal it. You
exactly.
tried to
Tried to
conceal the
make up,
homerness.
but I
Right.
should
So
have been so much more of a homer.
exactly. But either way, I felt like even our predictions, given
Yeah.
the tone surrounding our this team, 6-5-7, 6-6, 7-5, whatever we were saying, even that was considered kind of homerish, right? Like predicting this team gets to
Yeah.
a bowl game after the train
A
wreck of
bowl
last
game,
year,
definitely. Yeah.
right? Like it's just there's not enough to say about the job Dillingham has done, and I also think that you and I felt the progress coming. I don't think we
Oh,
expected it to
absolutely.
manifest in this way, but I think what has led to this team's success, the deciding factor, sort of the X factor, and what we've seen, all stems from the job that Dillingham has done, which is what we both acknowledged as the driving force behind our predictions. We just didn't expect it to manifest to the extreme degree that it has,
Yeah.
which is incredible. If this team beats BYU, man, given the state of U of A, that territorial cup is going to be intense.
It's going to
Maybe
be,
I can't remember a more intense one. Even that one in
well,
2014.
the most, well, that would be more intense. That's like, because like both teams had a chance to win the Pac-12 South. But what I'll say about the Territorial Cup before we get back into it is like, if U of A wins this weekend at TCU, now they're 12-point underdogs against a pretty good TCU team. So it's not set in stone. In fact, it's almost certainly they do lose. But if they do
Yeah.
win, then they'll enter the Territorial Cup at 5-6, meaning they will have something to play for beyond
Right,
just
bowl eligibility,
beating
right?
a, you know. And
Yeah.
so ASU, even if ASU loses this game against BYU, it will still have something to play for because for two reasons. One, they got their ass kicked by U of A last year, and many of the guys on the team were on the team last year. And then just getting, let's just, hopefully this doesn't happen. But if you lose BYU, you're still going to be 8-3. You get to 9-3, you will almost certainly be ranked, right?
Right. And I don't know, and you
accomplishment.
probably don't know off the top of your head, but are they technically mathematically eliminated from one of the top two spots if they lose? Depending on what happens with Colorado and Iowa State.
Yeah, I think they're still technically in it. It would take
a lot.
BYU losing again to Houston. It would take it would take a lot, but I guess they would technically still be in it.
Right. So I mean, that would give you enough to go down there and play for something. So that's good, but
that's another factor too. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I don't know, man. I remember the night before the Eagles played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, not just how am I going to fall asleep? How am I going to get through the next 8 hours before pregame coverage starts? Not before the game, before I can watch people talk about the game. And that's the kind of energy I've been feeling this week, right? And I mean, granted, it's I'm going to be on Mill for the game. I'm going to be with friends. All of that plays into it too. But it's
where are you going to watch the game?
Man, my mentality right now, we're going to start a Tempe Tavern, the best kept secret in Tempe, for just a little get right session, right? And then we'll light rail down to Mill, and our mentality right now is anywhere we can get in, right? But I don't know. That could change depending on what the scene is like down there. We'll see if Casa's still doing that. They usually do those big block parties. Or maybe they don't do it anymore.
I bet they will. Although they won't have to accommodate for too many BYU fans in there. So.
Oh yeah.
Maybe some.
Yeah, the soda fountain is going to have to be ready to work a little overtime.
They'll just all be a Jack in the Box pregame.
Yeah, the soda gun. Markup soda $5, no free refills.
Oh my god, that's funny.
But yeah, man, it's that type of feeling where it's regardless of what happens, the fact that this team has recaptured that intrigue, that people are this excited for an ASU game, it's a testament to the job. And now the conversation, and I'm sure we're going to hit on this a little bit, the conversation has started to shift a little bit to already chalking this season up as a success, which it is. They could lose the next 2 games, obviously be a huge disappointment, but they could lose these next 2 games. And then when you take once you're far enough removed from that pain and you look back at the season, 8-4 after 2 straight
anyone would have taken it. Yeah.
100%, man. So now the conversation has shifted to how do you sustain this, and looking at after Indiana extended their coach, how do you take care of Dillingham? How do you take care of his assistants? How do you keep these big name guys that are just getting better every week? That's another crazy thing, is the progression that we've seen from Levitt, from Jordan Tyson. Obviously Scadaboo's a senior, but he's become a household name. How do you keep the systems in place that have gotten us to this point and solidify that, I think, is what the conversation has started to shift to.
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot of things I want to touch on from your opening there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was kind of rambling.
No, it's fine, man.
I didn't really give you much of an on ramp.
No, dude, it's great. I mean, this is just it speaks to just the vibes, the joy, the unexpected success of this. It's just everyone is in and out, the ticket prices. My God, I heard on 98.7
absurd
this morning that, and a lot of that factors in with there's being a bunch of BYU fans in the Valley. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But if you're an ASU fan and you've been ticked off by the gestures, hands at everything with ASU athletics over the years, this is a game where you're oh, okay, I need to go to this game. There's no, forget about all the other issues you may have. This is the game you need to go to. And that nervous energy you're talking about, Colton, I've had nervous energy for ASU games this year, but it's a nervous energy in the sense of don't F this up. This loss would be really embarrassing. And I felt that before Kansas and UCF. And both
Okay.
times my instincts were proven right. Not in the sense that ASU lost, but just in the sense that like these are games. And the Kansas
Both
one,
very similar too. Those
yeah,
games were very similar.
same score in both.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's
The difference
crazy.
in those two games is though I thought UCF just played better than we did when we played them.
Yeah, I would agree.
Whereas Kansas, I thought ASU really outplayed Kansas, should have won that game by 10 or 14. But because
Horrible officiating in that game, and
there was some
I
tough
remember that.
officiating, there was two. I don't want to call them one fluky turnover from Jordan Tyson, right? It was the almost catch he had right by the goal line. He drops it, it gets picked off. That's a big swing. And then there was a dumb fumble he had too. So like correctable, turnovers. There was a blocked kick from that suffered that Kansas blocked one of our field goals in that too. So like there were scoring plays that ASU made, or I'm sorry, that ASU could have easily made but didn't make. And so like that game, anyway, I don't want to, but the reason I bring those two games up is like those were nervous energy type games of like, oh, like we're playing a team that we're better than, or at least that we're favored to beat, and
Right.
Now it's completely different this game. This is just like, you haven't felt this game since like this type of feeling, probably since the run up to the Notre Dame game in 2014, and maybe probably the run up to the Territorial Cup in 2014 as well. Because even though like we all remember how bad that Oregon State loss was, it didn't. That was their second loss of the year. Like it took them out of the one loss natty conversation, but they were still in the Pac-12 South race prior to that loss in Tucson in 2014. It's just this is like it's the biggest ASU game since that Notre Dame game in
for sure
2014. There's no they're like the Oregon game, Jaden Daniels' freshman year, and we've had there was a Washington game our senior year. Those were both really big games, but it was for ASU teams that were like 3-4 entering the game or 5-5 entering the game, and then you pick off one of these great teams when they weren't fully expecting it. That's not what this is. And by the way, BYU
BYU feels
also
like we're not the 100%. It feels like in those scenarios we were kind of like the hunters, right? And now in this scenario, this kind of feels like we're the hunted a little bit. I mean,
it feels even. Like it's two hunters clashing for
maybe you're right. Maybe that's a better way to put it, actually, is two teams that have had very similar seasons in the sense that like BYU and ASU were projected to be at the bottom of this conference, right? Like they've both exceeded expectations. I even think exceeding expectations is underselling it. They have done totally. They've had an incredible year, right? They're ahead of schedule. They're all of these things. So I think you're right. It's more of like both on the offensive, right? Both aggressors here, both trying to make this happen and push it forward. And it's just crazy, man. Like if they win this game, there is not a realistic shot. It's like take care of business, beat U of A, and you're going to the Pac-12 championship.
Big 12.
And if you Big 12. I'm sorry. You're going to the Big 12 championship. And if you win that, you're in the college football playoff. Like it's absurd, man. I can't even saying it is like this wasn't ever something anybody could have projected to happen. And I think everybody is like not only enjoying the ride, but like wringing every single drop out of the ride because we know how fleeting it can be. We've been through the worst, right? We've been through it. And it seems like it might not be fleeting this time. It seems like we're on to something a little more sustainable, but you can't ever
No,
You
for
have to
sure.
enjoy
Yeah.
this stuff when it's happening. So I think that's the energy that I'm feeling is
Yes.
everybody is trying to enjoy every minute of this run, and hopefully not that it's going to end, right? But like there's a magic, there's like a an energy surrounding this Pac-12 or this, I keep saying that, this Big 12 scenario. And I mean, it's not over with a loss, but hopefully after Saturday, it's the train is full steam ahead. That was a Herm analogy. I can't use the train, but hopefully the energy is only building after Saturday. I can't even put it into words. I'm so juiced.
It's awesome, man. It really is. And I think one thing is like, I don't know why I'm pulling up the BYU box score. One thing that stood out is like a lot of just casual, like a lot of casuals are jumping on too,
Right,
and it's like
right.
they're cognizant of what's going on, and like that's big, man. It's just
Yeah, you need
it's
the
nice that
casuals.
ASU is kind of taking this spotlight in the valley, and it's been a while, and
Absolutely.
mostly deservedly so. Like there's a contingent of ASU fans who like, oh, the local media doesn't cover us enough, all this, and it's like, man, we've been a mid-tier at best college football program since 2014, and there hasn't been like like why would they focus on ASU over the Cardinals or Suns? So it's like, but now it's like they have to, and it's not like it's it's just nice to just get more attention. It really is, and
Now,
um,
yeah, now that you mention it, it feels like at this point in time, right now, as we're having this conversation, ASU is the main draw in town. Like,
it does. Well, it
which
does
is
because
crazy because I mean,
Cardinals are
obviously
good.
the Suns, but the Cardinals are having a year where they might be ahead of schedule, right? So it's like,
I think there's two reasons, just because of in terms of right now, this moment. One is the Cardinals were on a bye last weekend, whereas
good
ASU
call.
filled the void with, again, its most impactful win since Notre Dame in 2014. So, when you
Yeah,
juxtapose that, it makes sense. And then also ASU will be in town this weekend. The Cardinals will be up in Seattle.
yeah,
So those are two
that's a good point.
factors. But it's also like, again, we're living in the moment. Like right now, that's what's great about college football. It's like the in the moment matters so much.
Right, but, like, in
And
the past, bye weeks wouldn't have mattered. In the past, none of that would have mattered. It would have just been
right,
ASU.
right.
Oh, ASU's playing, like, it feels like the energy that we kinda have about this game is not limited to just the people that are big fans of this team. It has extended, like you said, to the casual fans and to the casual onlookers, right? Like, it's become so much bigger, and that's, I think, again, we keep coming back to the Dillingham effect, but his impact on this team has gone so much further than just the results on the field, right? And the
Well,
results on the field are a factor of that too.
yeah, for sure. And obviously, he's been so, openly like wanting the community to get on board, wanting local businesses and big businesses in the valley to get on board, which is, in my opinion, much more important than your average fan donating to
Right.
NIL. That's the reality of it. But I saw today on Brad Sismat's Twitter feed that Dillingham does a coaches show every Wednesday night at this place called the Trophy Bar in Chandler. I haven't been. I probably that's not really my thing. I don't think I would go. But today it was like overflow because so many people wanted to go. And
Oh, sweet.
part of me is like, it's kind of annoying that it's taking this for this to happen, but this is so unexpected. So that's another
Right.
factor in it too. So like that's the other thing. Like
100%.
this season, even if let's just say they go 9, like worst case scenario. I don't think they're going to go 8-4, but let's just say they go 9-3, and that will transfer over into people being like, oh, ASU, like, okay, I'll go to a game, like a little more next year. Whereas this past year, no one knew what to go to. And like, I don't want to go to an ASU game, watch them get blown out, like
Right.
the previous stuff years, previous years matter in college football, even though they shouldn't. And you kind of see this with like the way that Indiana is being talked about by some in the media right now. It's like, oh, are they actually that good? It's like, okay, well, they're 10-0, like in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
But
in the Big Ten.
yeah. And again, they haven't played the hardest schedule, but still. Anyway, it does like it just all this auxiliary stuff, ancillary stuff, like it does take time to build. And this season is a huge stepping stone in that point. Obviously, like if they go 10-2 and win the Big 12 and win a playoff game, then I mean it's going to be even more an overdrive, obviously. Like,
right.
But it doesn't even need to be that, right? Which is so it's good to see. And like the thing is, they can win this BYU game. I have BYU schedule pulled up, so they are not playing their best football as of late. Their win
BYU
at UCF 37-24 a few weeks ago, that is a pretty dang good win.
Should have lost to Utah.
They should have lost to Utah, arguably. And then that 38-35 win over Oklahoma State at home does not, and then obviously they lose to Kansas. Like that's a pretty underwhelming 4-game stretch, you know.
Right.
And then you look at ASU, we are ascending right now, with the one exception of ironically also being against UCF when we won, but in a pretty, I'd say, unimpressive way. I guess that Cincinnati game is in a 4-game stretch for us, but like I'd argue ASU as a whole played better against Cincinnati than it did against UCF, weirdly.
Right, and you have to consider the context with Cincinnati and everything that went into that, but you're absolutely right.
ASU has two
what were you going to say?
Double-digit road wins. Oh, I was just saying ASU has 2 double-digit road wins in that stretch. The Kansas State game wins.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It feels like these are two teams moving in opposite directions, right? ASU just had their biggest win of the season. BYU just lost their undefeated season, which it's like that's not the end of the world. I get it.
And their defense played well in that game too. Like we have to acknowledge that.
In Kansas, I think we have to give Kansas credit because I think they're aware that which could play into ASU.
That Kansas Colorado game is going to be fun.
That's what I'm trying to. That's what I was going to say, man. Is Kansas is one more loss, they're not going to a bowl game. And I think they recognize that, right? And I think Colorado is everybody's pick to win this conference at this point. But I don't think that makes them this well-oiled machine that can't be beat, especially by a Kansas team that might be hitting their stride because they've had an extremely disappointing season, right? So I think this might be the right time for us to need Kansas to do something. Right. And I mean, we also get the benefit of BYU drawing Houston next week, which was just dismantled by U of A. So it is weird how like the stars are kind of aligning for ASU right now. You look at the schedule and it's not one of those things where like, I hate to invoke the collapse of the Diamondbacks, but it's not like you need, there's a doubleheader on the last day of the season and you need one team to sweep to get into the play. Like it's a scenario that's not far-fetched, right? And real quick, to your point on, you mentioned the overflow for that show that Sesmat did with Dylan.
No, it's not so he doesn't do it. It's a different, but
okay. Well, either way, the overflow and the size of the crowd and all of that stuff. I think it all kind of comes together, right? You see people showing up, you see those casual fans saying like, oh yeah, I'll go to a game, right? I think all of that stuff makes the NIL variable even more attractive to local businesses, to fans, all of that stuff, right? Because you're looking at like the casual fans equate to more eyes, right? The casual fans equate to higher attendance, all of that stuff. And businesses are seeing that. And I think Dillingham's strategy of really playing to that and the whole activate the valley thing and get these fans out of, wherever they've been, bring them back out, show them this is a program worth supporting is what has translated to that activation, so to speak, of all of those people. But I just think that strategy that he's implemented has been a far cry from we're just going to ignore the changing landscape.
I don't want to talk about that. Let's not talk about that.
It's the polar opposite, which is perfect.
Yeah. No,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
man,
And you've seen, we see the new Scatterburger that got literally a
yeah,
mention on the playoff show last night by Reese Davis, and it's like, oh, okay, like that's picking up steam. I saw today, Sun Angel Collective reached an agreement with Twin Peaks. It says together
I
we're
was gonna
taking,
mention that too. The
yeah,
Twin Peaks, and
together we're taking Sun Devil athlete NIL opportunities to new heights. Big things ahead for our student athletes as we strengthen community connections in the valley. We are thrilled, yada yada. So it's basically just a partnership, but which is just funny that it's Twin Peaks. I literally
yeah,
didn't know. A few years ago, I casually mentioned to like a girl I was dating at the time, like, "Oh, let's go to Twin Peaks." I just thought it was like a sports bar, but
Are you gonna tell me you were unaware that Twin Peaks
I
meant
was unaware. I literally had no idea.
breasts, Mark?
I had no
You know what's
idea.
funny? I took
I'm
my
not even
grandma to
joking.
Twin Peaks.
I'm not even
You
joking. I
took
didn't
a
know.
you took a date. I took my grandma
No,
to
no,
Twin
we didn't.
Peaks.
No, I mentioned it, and then she's like, she was like, no. I looked at anyway. We didn't end up going,
Yeah,
but
I took my grandma, and I was like, she's like, throw out a place. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. I'm like, well, there's a Twin Peaks between you and I. You want to go there? So we went, and ever since we went that one time, that was the place that she always wanted to go, was Twin Peaks. And I'm like, what do you just like? Is the food great? Do you enjoy the outfits? What is it, Grandma? But it could be any number of things, I suppose.
it's the NIL deals with ASU athletes. That's what it is.
Yep, there you go.
That's funny. But anyway, like we're seeing that. Did you see this? Jordan Crook, ASU linebacker, had some car
I did
issues. And
see
like,
that one
yeah,
too.
and
Yeah,
if like the Sun Devil source boards, people on there raise like 15K pretty quickly, and it's like it's good to see like this type of stuff building. I guess since we're on the topic, like it really feels like we don't have to worry about Sam Levitt leaving. And again,
right.
like anything could happen, knock on wood. But there was an article. I'm going to pull this up. I don't have a On3 membership, so I didn't read this. But this is we got this on screen. Yeah, this is a quote in a tweet from Pete Nakos, who is on On3. Kenny Dillingham has a QB and Sam Levitt who wants to win big at Arizona State. Ace, you can go all in and be well positioned for the 2025 CFP. I want to win and make Arizona State something it's never been before. That's what Kenny Dillingham sees. You have that,
That's crazy.
and then did you see Jake Garcia, who works at 12 News here in the Valley? He had a tweet the other day. It was a clip of a video interview he did with Sam Levitt's dad, and Sam Levitt's dad.
Right, I did see that.
So, that tweet has since been deleted, but I feel like it was also. I saw
you mean the tweet with like the video with Levitt's dad got deleted?
But yeah, but here's the
Okay.
the reason why
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it didn't drop yet or something. But
no, exactly. I think that might have been it. Like because Cam Cox quote tweeted it and said, he said like Jake's working on something. So I think maybe it was like teased as a clip, and like maybe they didn't want it out there that as part of like the clip. But like when you have Levitt saying this, when you have whether or not like the video from is people saw that video and big reporters quote tweeted it. It doesn't feel like they're looking to leave. It feels like Levitt is like, okay, like this is a good spot for me, like
yeah, he feels the fit.
And maybe I could get like if I really wanted to wring every NIL cent out there, then I could go somewhere else. I think that's always a thing, but I don't know. Like I can just speak for myself. Like if I'm Levitt and I'm in a good situation, right? Dillingham isn't going anywhere. I know people are kind of freaking out about his contract and all this. Like I just don't think he's he would leave this offseason.
No, he's already said this is his dream job. He's
And
lived
he
here
said
his
it
whole
so
life.
many
Like,
times. Like,
yeah,
and
he's
there is
not going
pressure
anywhere.
from, Bickley wrote a great column. I recommend everyone check it out at Arizona Sports. That like there's so much groundswell of like, hey, you need to get this guy signed. Like, I think it's going to happen. I just like I'm choosing just not to worry about that.
Right.
Same with Levitt. In terms of Jordan Tyson, I'm a little bit more worried about him just because he's so talented. He's so good. But like, I think that there will be enough money for those two, at least. There will be enough NIL money for those two. And
I agree.
especially like with Levitt particularly, like, do you really want to leave? And even Tyson too, like him and Levitt have such a good connection. They both like
Yeah, and I
Dillingham
think
believed in those guys too. Like
with
Dillingham
both
took
of
in
those
Levitt.
guys,
Dillingham was the first to
yeah,
offer Levitt. And Levitt comes down here because he had a connection with Dillingham and also Arroyo. And then Tyson, Tyson had some injuries last year,
yep.
and Dillingham still wanted him. And so like, and both of those guys have been at schools before. So they know.
That's what I was gonna say, man.
Okay,
Is
yeah.
like they've
Talk
both
about that.
they've
Yeah.
both already they both have already transferred before. It's like you have to consider one when you find a spot and you start to develop the way both of these guys have developed. It's
Yep.
like how much of that can you attribute to the location that you're at, right? And the coach that you're playing with. And I think given what Dillingham has done, both of those guys have to be like, okay, I'm in a good spot to continue to flourish, right? You're always going to have to consider the money in this landscape. They can probably, and it's like, how much more are they really going to be able to get? I guess it
Yeah.
all depends on the school, right? Some of these schools can roll out a Brinks truck for them. I get it. But I think there's a lot of factors to consider. And as far as Dillingham, I think the fear shouldn't necessarily be losing Dillingham. The fear should be more centered around, and I think he did a good job of recruiting guys that have a solid standing in Arizona, right, and have a background in Arizona.
Yeah.
Given all of the high school guys that he went out and got, and people affiliated with Arizona high school, but I think you also need to find a way to keep the core of his assistant coaches intact some way, right?
Yeah.
They're always going to look for, other
Especially the top
opportunities,
two.
but yeah, at least in the infancy of what they're building,
Right.
this is year one of like being a serious contender to do big things. Like you can't lose these guys after year one, right? You have to find a way. And that's what Dillingham keeps talking about. Take care of the assistants. And
Yeah.
hopefully they find a way to do that. But I think you bring up an interesting point with Tyson, is it's like we've seen a lot from Levitt, and you have
Well,
his dad.
there's still some scars from Badger transferring out,
Right. No,
because
that's a
like it
good
would be
point,
pretty
man.
nice to have Badger on this team. It would be.
100%.
I don't know if it would have.
100%.
I don't know if it would have actually meant any different wins or losses, though. That is one thing I keep like. Maybe some games would have gone differently, but I don't think he would have been the difference in winning one of the two games they lost. But anyway.
Yeah,
But
and
like,
I mean, you bring up a good point with Tyson, though, is it's like we haven't really heard too much from him. All that we can point to is the progression and the development that he's undergone with
yeah.
Sam Levitt and Dillingham in
And
this
Hines
system,
Ward
right?
as his head
And
coach,
Hines
or as
Ward,
his
that's a big
position coach.
draw.
Yeah.
100%. There's a lot of young guys. There's a lot of high school guys committing to ASU because it's like, how do you not play for Hines Ward, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that has an effect too. Like, there's so many factors to consider, but you hope that this isn't something where it's like, oh, it's only going to come down to money, and I don't think it will. But I don't know how often ASU, which is good. I'm glad we're in this position. I don't know how often ASU is going to be able to outbid for recruits, for transfers, right? But I don't think those are the guys you want either that are going to take the most amount of money.
Not necessarily. Yeah.
No, and I
Because the
don't think
guys who are really worth it are just going to go to Oregon or wherever, like
right.
ASU won't even be able to pay that anyway. So it's not like you're going to be like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You made a
I
good point.
I think we're in a good spot. I think we're in a good spot with the culture. I think we're in a good spot with the culture not only like being this thing we talk about as fans is like, look at what the culture Dillingham's building, but a culture that's yielding tangible results, right?
Mm-hmm.
A culture that has seen Sam Levitt progress to what he is, seen Jordan
Yes.
Tyson progress to what he's become. I mean, even Scadaboo over the last 2
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
Growing into what
Some of
he's
the
become from,
safeties on defense, Shamari
Sac State.
Simmons,
Yeah, the whole defense under Brian Ward, man.
Xavier
Like,
Alford has been really good. Like, it's good to see. And I have two more thoughts with, well, I guess with Badger, I have a thought is like he was, he did commit to Herm Edwards. He
right,
was a left, he was in, so like that has to be considered with Badger leaving. Maybe it seemed like he had a good vibe here, but I don't know. You never know why. There's always a reason, but
right.
and like another thing with Tyson is his older brother got drafted in the NBA. He was a first round pick by the Cavs. He went to 3 colleges. He was at Texas, Texas Tech, then Cal. And so I think he would be a guy who would I think if you're Jordan Tyson, you look and say, okay, like if I have a good year this upcoming year, I will be a first or second round draft pick. Like he is that good.
Right, for
And
sure.
so
And
he's going to
that
ask,
you have a better shot at doing that with the familiarity
right,
in year
exactly.
2,
And
right?
you're already in a
So
good position. You're already in a good position. So
100%.
another one more factor that ties into all this. I listened to the Sun Devil Source Report podcast. They did like one. They called it like unfiltered. It was just them driving back to Kansas City Airport in the middle of the night after the game, and it had some really good information. And in there, Cartman was saying how they have this ASU roster is like $3 million in NIL, which is a good step forward from where they were. But it's also, it's not like that's some incredible, war chest to work with. But
Yeah.
and it's the concerns of like, oh, like that number needs to be higher. And it's like in the back of my head, I'm like, of course. But you have to remember, like people, the money they got for this year, this wasn't a go all in, year for ASU football. This was
100%.
like let's keep building, and it speaks to Dillingham to get that $3 million in NIL, but it's not like this was a year where everyone went on going in was like, oh, like this is the year, like we need to keep these great players that we have. It's like it was like, oh, we just need to improve. But now,
$1
like
million for each win.
if you're a booster, someone who's moneyed in the Valley, and you see this, it's like, oh, okay, like I can invest to keep Tyson and Levitt and CJ Fight and whomever else that's rising on this team. So that's what's encouraging is like it's not like people went into this year being like, oh, we need to have like this great NIL budget, because the NIL budget for these power programs isn't the same every year. That's one thing that like kind of gets I'm pretty sure like University of Washington's NIL was more last year when they had like 10 NFL draft picks and all these really high profile guys that you knew it was going to be their last year there, right? And Ohio
Right.
State this year, they went all in on NIL. They got the safety Downs. They got in the running back from Ole Miss. They got in a few other guys. Like they went in on the portal this year. Like this Ohio State team has a lot of senior guys. So like I think it's a fallacy for fans to just be like, because everyone just looks at Oregon. Well, Oregon's in a complete different, like, don't even think about them. Like it's not
Right. Not everybody can have
no,
a
but
night as a booster.
even the power programs, it's not every year they have this exact amount. Now, I think that's going to change because that's the other thing is like teams are going to soon will be able to just pay. It's going to be like $20 million that has to get split up between their athletes. So then NIL becomes important still, but not quite as crucial. Because eventually, like it's just an unsustainable model to have donors and that pay for all of it.
Right.
Because they're emotional, right? Like it's people putting down a bunch of money and it's like, oh, I put down this money and now it's not working. So
Take all of it.
it's a lot to think about. It is. I kind of wish we were just having this type of season in, 2017, 2018, and we don't have to worry like, oh, is so-and-so going to enter the portal? Is, all this like but even if Leavitt does lead, like if they go 10-2 and make the Big 12 championship game, and there's a part of me that's like, okay, like if bad stuff happens after this, like I'll
at
take
least
it.
we had one.
The thing is, like, it's just if you were the Leavitt family, you wouldn't have your kid quoting like, "I want to win and make Arizona State something it's never been before." That's what Kenny Dillingham sees. You wouldn't have like. I don't think they're like looking to squeeze every dime out of it.
Right. They're not like, we'll see what the future holds. Like they're making concrete statements, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think, man, give us $1 million for each win, right? We had $3 million this year, 3 wins. That's fine. Give us $9 million, $10 million next year. That's how it should be.
Yeah, and if ASU had that amount, then we wouldn't have to be thinking about. And I don't think I think the only, I don't know. Tyson is a little bit more of a flight risk, I guess, but we have no actual like data to say that. We just
it's more based on like the lack of data, right?
Exactly.
Like we just assume like, oh, this could happen because we haven't heard that it wouldn't, and we're going off of the current climate of college football. Right. And obviously the recency bias of like Elijah Badger and all of that, that's all we have to go off of. So, I mean, naturally, we haven't heard anything from Jordan Tyson. We have no idea. But that's just kind of the
I mean, is there a chance he goes to because he's a redshirt sophomore, correct? I'm looking this up right now.
Oh, you're talking
draft? I think he's a redshirt sophomore. So that means I think he would because you have to have 3 years. Like, do you think there's an outside chance he just goes to the NFL? Probably not. Yeah, redshirt sophomore. I mean, he's had.
So he would be eligible, right?
He has 8. Yeah, 8. I think so. 833 yards, 9 touchdowns. His game log, he's had 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Even against Cincinnati, he had 108 yards when Sims was playing.
Yeah, I mean, there is no way to project that one.
The Mississippi State game, he didn't do anything, but every game after that, he's been productive. So I mean, it seems unlikely that he would go to the draft because there's always a bunch of wide receivers. Like this year, you're going to have T-Mac, Travis Hunter, whatever you want to classify him as, Luther Burden at Missouri, and then there will probably be some other or 2 wide receivers that jump up during the process. So if you're Tyson, it's probably smarter to just go in the draft. What would it be? The 2026 NFL draft, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting wrinkle though, because I didn't even realize he would have been eligible, but I think that there's something because this is really his first full season of college football, right? Given all the injuries, did he play?
No, he had a.
Oh, he played as a freshman
full season at Colorado,
right? That's right. Okay, yeah. So he got hurt and transferred. God, that's right. Okay, that's true. So I think you got to consider the lack of experience too, and that's a real selling point to come back for one more year. I don't know. All of the variables with Tyson seem to point toward like why would he leave, right? So that's good. I'm not super worried about it right now. I think the big thing is like the coaching staff, like taking care of those guys, making sure they're laying the groundwork to make this sustainable so that we're not back to the norm, which I don't think we will be. I think Dillingham is a different beast altogether. So
at least, sustainable-ish, right? Like,
yeah, as sustainable
no one's expecting
as
ASU to like jump up and be like, oh, we're going to be a blue blood now. Like, let's just try to be
like a perennial contender in the Big 12 at the very least.
Yes, and that is achievable. That is an achievable
100%. 100%.
Yeah, it would be great to be a program like Kansas State where we're sitting, if we're sitting in some year and we're 7-3 with 2 games to go and we're like, oh, we should have been better, like that's how you're a good program, right?
Right.
So let's talk about
that should be the standard. That should be the standard for what ASU
in the Big 12
should accomplish in this conference. They should be, especially after this year,
a team that it's kind of expected that you win 8 games. right?
Right, and it's a
Yeah.
disappointment when you don't get there. That's the sort of team that they can be, and I think that's the sort of team they're building.
Yeah, and I mean, the lines of scrimmage have been pretty dang good, especially offensive line. Defensive edges have kind of slowed down a bit. I kind of forget. I forgive them for not getting a sack against Avery Johnson. Like he was tough to bring down.
Yeah.
And they had some like tackles for loss too. So it will be interesting. Like Retzlaff is mobile, but he's less mobile than Johnson. And they had 3 sacks against Rizek. Now, I think UCF has better receivers. I think BYU has a good receiver in Chase Roberts, but I don't know about the other guys. It'll be interesting. I mean, it does feel like we're in a good spot as a program. Like there's no way around it. And next year, like Levitt's just going to be better. They're going to have a good running back, whoever it is, right? Like I saw that they were in the mix for some 4-star JUCO guy. And so, like he'll be able to pop right in.
Yeah.
And if you're that guy, you have to watch and be like, oh, like I'll get, catch balls thrown to me out of the backfield. Like this is a good place to go. And you still have Kyson Brown coming back, Jason Brown, freshman this year.
Yep.
He's someone to watch for next year. I do wonder if how much he'll be used, because now you don't have to worry about his red shirt. Although I'm pretty sure I'm not 100% sure how it works with like bowl games and stuff, but there's only 2. He's played in 1 game and there's, 2 regular season games left. So probably won't see him, but yeah, it's a good spot to be in. I mean, the fact that we're just in this place to begin with, like, it just feels nice, and it feels, yeah. I mean, we might have had conversations like this at kind of the peak of the Herm Edwards era, but
I would say the peak of that era was just before probably 2019. And
it was 2019, yeah.
Or whenever was 29 was 19 when they played Oregon with that
Yep.
like the shot to go,
and then
2020. Okay,
2020 was nothing. In 2019 they beat FSU in the Sun Bowl in a pretty ugly game. But what I will say is, like, we can talk about the peak of the Herm Edwards era. Like ASU is 8-2, and if they go 8, Herm's best year at ASU was 8-4. So, it's more than likely Dillingham's second year will be better than Herm's best year. And Herm took over a better situation. That cannot be understated. Like Herm took over a team that had Manny Wilkins, Eno Benjamin, and N'Keal Harry.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they added Brandon Ayuk. I give them credit for that, for finding him out of JUCO. So, but like, it wasn't a complete disaster. It was a 7-5 team the year before. So anyway, how much do you want to touch on the actual Kansas State game? I mean, the pick to start out was awesome. And then Levitt just incredible in the first half. Really, I mean, he was pretty dang good in the second half too. And some of those 5-minute drives that they had in the late in the fourth quarter to just kind of.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. That was the big thing, right? Is like, you get out to that hot start and you're kind of, dude, Parker Lewis hitting a field goal, like
a 47-yard field goal.
Now we're spoiled.
That was actually an enormous play. Like,
I know it was.
In the context of the game.
In the context of the game, like, and yeah, exactly. Maybe they have a guy they trust to kick field goals now, which is like, who knew that would ever happen, right? So I think looking back at the game, the biggest takeaways for me, and we've seen this is something that's been recurring over the course of the year, is Dillingham knows what he needs to do in terms of game management to run clock when he needs to. When this team needs a drive, or when this team needs to bleed clock, they're better, and Dillingham is better at that than any coach I can remember watching as far as, ASU, which I guess is Todd Graham and Herm Edwards. But like, that stuff stands out. It's one of those things where it's like, if they do it well, it stands out. If they don't, it's just like it's insufferable. You hate watching it. But I mean, from that to the delay of game penalties on the punt to run even more time off the clock too.
That was awesome.
Yeah, like he understands what he needs to do to get his team through those certain moments, which it's like ASU did lose the momentum at a certain point, right? Which I mean, they're on the road, they're playing K-State. Yeah. K-State's a solid team. They needed some of that stuff. They needed those drives. It wasn't even necessarily that they needed points, and they didn't score any more points after the Parker Lewis thing.
Would have been nice to get at least like one more field goal.
100%. Would you want more points? Absolutely. I'm not saying they didn't, but like the fact that they understand or Dillingham and his staff understand the game within the game, and they're cognizant of that stuff when it's happening. It's like that gives you so much faith in the coaching staff and to understand like, okay, these guys recognize they know what they need to do in these moments, and they know how to bleed the clock or make decisions to preserve wins in situations like that, because it was precarious. It was a little dicey. I was getting nervous, man.
Oh, I was
like, they're not going to – there's no way they fumble this. They can't. And then, I mean, that miss, it was kind of out of a little bit like, okay, I think we're going to escape, even if he would have hit that field goal at the end, the K-State kicker. But, I mean, I don't think the miss right after he missed that, it was ball game. And it's like I want to say that game management by Dillingham is ultimately – the difference. And it's just another instance where something Dillingham has done has sort of been the X factor in getting a win, right? So
yeah, for sure. I mean, no, that once Jordan Tyson fumble, like obviously that sucked and that totally changed the momentum of the game.
Right.
But like I actually felt pretty good once they got the 2-point stop on the first K-State touchdown, because had they not gotten that, then K-State could have conceivably just done 3 touchdowns with the 2-point conversion.
Right.
They had that first 7 plays, 20 yards, takes 5:06 off. Obviously, that's impacted by the penalties, the yardage total. Once Kansas State scored that touchdown drive, 4 plays, 90 yards, that included like a 45-yard run by Giddens. I was like, oh God. That I felt really bad during that drive, but
it was nerve-wracking, dude. It was nerve-wracking.
It was not it was just one of those games where it's just like, can we just it was similar to the Mississippi State game, honestly, where it's like, let's just get done.
Just escape. This game needs 7 fewer minutes.
I know.
That's like that's how you're feeling the whole time.
No, it felt, I'll say this, it feels good to just leave with like winning by 10 points instead of winning 24-21 or something. Like,
even though covered their spread.
Yeah, totally. So it's a good spot to be in. Not the best game from Scattaboo. They had him pretty bottled up, but that's a great
run defense. Yep.
Yeah.
You got it.
And as a whole, we still rushed for 123 yards. So it's not the end. It's not the worst thing. And, Kansas State's probably the best run defense they'll play for the rest of the year. BYU's pretty good, but Neal had some big runs on them with Kansas. And Scattaboo still contributed with 4 catches for 44 yards. Mateer, another sneaky game. Guillory and Stovall, it's nice to see them get involved. And then Tyson, 12 catches for 176 yards.
Yeah, he was all over the place, man. And that's the thing, though. That's what you kind of like to see that. You kind of like to see a game where Scatterbo isn't the one carrying you, right? You kind of talked about it. They balled him up a little bit. He's still going to make contributions, right? He is who he is. He's going to have some sort of impact, but he gets bottled up. So then Jordan Tyson explodes, right? Maybe Tyson and Scatterbo get bottled up. Scatterbo. I keep doing that. Scatterbo. Maybe Tyson and Scatterbo get bottled up, and then you see somebody like Guillory get less attention because of that, right? So, like, when you get guys that are showing on film that there's somebody you need to pay attention to, I think that benefits everybody else. And I think Dillingham and his his staff are cerebral enough to game plan for that too. Like they're aware. They've got to be aware that maybe Tyson and Scattaboo are starting to get that attention from other teams, or not starting for Scattaboo, but maybe it's happening for Tyson.
Pick your
And they've got
poison.
it
It's a good spot to
right.
be
Pick your
in for
poison.
ASU.
It's a deep skill player group, and people
Yeah.
just don't know it because of how good the top has been. I think
Yeah.
that's how I'd describe it.
Yep. And that's a good, it's a good point. So going to be a sellout this weekend. There will be a good chunk of BYU fans there. It'll be a decent amount, but I think there'll still be a lot of ASU fans. And the fact that it's this, there's so much demand proves that it's not only one side. So it'll be a great environment. What do you think of ASU's ranking at 21 before we move to basketball?
I'm just glad they're in, man. Once you get to a point, it's like just put them in the ranking. Like,
Well, I mean, yeah. I will say, Tulane is ahead of us at 20. I think that I don't like that, but they play Army at one point, so I think that'll take care of itself. And Army's going to play Notre Dame. That'll probably drop them.
The thing that I'm looking at with the rankings too is like you kind of said it'll take care of itself. I think it'll take care of itself with ASU as well, right? They've got,
of course, yeah.
I mean, they're going to play BYU. If they get to the Big 12 championship, they're going to play another ranked team. They're going to end up being one of the, if they win the Big 12, they will be one of the top 4 conference winners. So, I mean, all of that ranking stuff will take care of itself. It's one of those things where we have the benefit of like not needing to rely on rankings anymore, which is really nice.
It is. Well, speaking of rankings, ASU men's basketball might find itself ranked somewhat soon. They are currently playing Cal Poly right now. There's 15 minutes left, and they lead 59-50. But I was at the game against St. Thomas. That was kind of not the most well-played game by ASU men's basketball, but they went on to win by 15 points. So pulled away. But, I mean, that game at the Footprint Center against GCU on Thursday was a blast. And it was a great environment. ASU played awesome. Held Tyon Grant Foster to, I mean, he still had a decent game, but they limited him. Quaintance made some huge plays on the defensive end. Bashir Jihad is just, it's so nice to have a reliable interior scorer, or at least a reliable interior guy who draws free throw attempts. But Joson Sinan, and you saw this against St. Thomas too, he is a dead-eye shooter. And it looks so good coming out of his hands when he's shooting. It's exciting to see. It really is.
Yeah, man. And I mean, we were watching that Gonzaga game at my place a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was. And they were hanging around with Gonzaga, in a shootout of a game too in Spokane. And
Right.
This is in the early going. This is when, you're kind of figuring out the pieces. And we saw that against Idaho State, where it's like, what are we doing here? And things have just sort of started to figure themselves out a little bit. Roles are being carved out. You talk about starting slow against St. Thomas, that sort of thing. And
they're kind of dealing with that right now. We're recording this as they're playing Cal Poly. So
right. I think once they get to this is sort of like the feeling out part too. Beating a GCU team is big. That team was favored to win that game, were they not?
They were by like 5.5 points.
5.5, and you go take care of business. So I think they're in a good spot too. I think they're extremely deep, which is awesome. And I think guys are just going to continue to establish their roles on this team, which once you get to conference play, that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
So.
And they can shoot pretty well too. This isn't one of these.
Yeah.
They actually have, like, it's not just Sinan. Bashir Jihad can hit a three. Adam Miller looks pretty good this year. BJ Freeman is a shooter. Austin Mason he's been the most underrated. I didn't really know anything about him entering this year because he was at Missouri State. Like I don't know what to expect like with these guys transferring up, but he's played really well and he's kind of I don't know if you want to call him like a true point guard, but like he can play point guard, and so he's been a really good addition for this team as well.
Yeah, man, good stuff with basketball.
Yeah.
We're kind of full speed ahead with football right now, but that's going to be something like I really lock into when football is done, but and spring starts to
There's
heat
a
up a
lot more
little
to
bit.
be.
But
Yeah.
I think they're gonna be in a good spot, and we're gonna get some really good non-con games here coming up with Florida and
Yeah, it's too bad they're all not at DFA, but oh well.
Yeah, who was the other? There's another big one.
Here, let me pull up their schedule.
Is it UMass or something? There's somebody. I don't know if it's UMass.
No, yeah. So they have 3 more games. New Mexico State is neutral, and a lot of these neutral site games. Yeah, it's in Palm Springs. They play New Mexico on the 28th, 9:30 p.m. on True TV. The Acrisure Classic, world-renowned Acrisure Classic. That should be a decent win. New Mexico is a good program, but a lot of these neutral sites, they generate NIL money. That like they give the kids some NIL money for playing. So that does explain why there's a few more games that are played on neutral sites, right? So the game against Florida on the December 14th is in Atlanta, and then the game against UMass is in Massachusetts in the basketball Hall of Fame or whatever. So that's why. But yeah, then eventually once you get into conference play, there's a lot more good matchups. So all right now ASU men's basketball up by 8 with 12:30 left in the second half. It's a good place to be. And I do want to touch on ASU women's volleyball. They are now 26-2, ranked 9th in the country. They just swept West Virginia and Cincinnati, both on the road this past weekend. They host Iowa State tomorrow, and then they're at Colorado versus UCF. None of those are ranked, so they have a good chance to finish the regular season 29-2, and they will be in the top 10 after that. So really watch for them. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some volleyball expert or anything, but like
you're not
really ascended to the top of the league and just the top of the sport very quickly to become a top 10 team. So that's a fun story going on. And I mean, they got a pretty good crowd at Mullet recently too. So just a lot of good vibes around ASU athletics right now. It's good to see.
For sure, man. I didn't know you weren't a volleyball expert.
I'm not. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice, and make sure to follow the College Huddle. I should have led with that. Lots of great shows. I appeared on Saturday's Warrior earlier today, which is the BYU show under the College Huddle Network, the largest fan-driven podcast network in the country.
How'd that go?
It went well. Nice guy, and I picked a 27-20 ASU win. He picked a 27-24 BYU win. So
nice. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we were both kind of talking about like it's great to just be in this spot.
Yeah, happy to be here.
They entered the year under similar expectations than us. So I gave my ASU score. I'll say 27-20 ASU. Before we head out, Colton, what do you have?
Oof. Depends on if they cut off soda sales at half.
Oh man.
No, I'm gonna go. What was yours?
There are Mormon ASU fans as well, Colton. I went 27-20. So
there are, but there are a lot more. There are a lot more.
That root for BYU.
Beer consuming ASU fans.
That is true.
I would argue. Let's see. What did you say it was? What was your score?
I said 27-20 ASU.
Okay.
Because BYU's defense.
I do like the defensive angle here. 27-20 is good. I'm going to go I'm going to go with what that guy said on the podcast, 27-24, but ASU. It's going to
Okay.
be a nail biter, and the defense is going to come up with it.
I like it. I will say
That's
my
what's
one
going to
final
happen.
thought leaving this, like, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever, but it feels more likely that if there's a blowout in this game, it feels more likely that ASU wins by blowout than BYU.
I would agree with that. I would
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. I think
But
that
I mean,
kind of
that's also
gels.
yeah,
That
it's
kind
a
of gels
3-point
with
spread.
that kind of gels with the whole two teams heading in an opposite direction sort of thing. Like BYU should be 0-2 in their last two games, right? Like just based on how those games were played. They've been outplayed in two straight games. So
yeah.
ASU meanwhile is hitting their stride, coming off a massive win. That's another thing though, man, is they can't, and I don't, this will be a good test of like, this will be my last thought real quick, but this will sort of be a good, I think, check of Dillingham's ability to. They've embraced that underdog role quite a bit, but now it's like they're starting to get a little recognition.
Good point.
They came off of a huge win at Kansas State. How are they going to respond to that? I think that might be a completely different beast.
That is true.
How
Well,
are
I
you going
saw
to respond to success?
Levitt was saying, like, we like being the underdog. So I think they're just kind of in that mindset.
That's good, and I hope that's the case. I hope that. I don't think this is the team. I don't think this is a team coached by Dillingham that'll come out flat or come out unprepared. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. But it is another test because we haven't seen them in this position before under Dillingham, right? Given the magnitude of this game. So
I mean, it does seem like there's just good player leadership on this team as well. Like I saw some of on the videos that ASU Social shared, like you have Xavier Alford in the locker room being like, he had a really good point. It's like, I forget exactly what it was, but it's like, we never, like, it was along the lines of like, we might not be in this position again. Like you only get this moment once type of deal. And it's like, it's true. Like,
yeah.
And I think that's a really good mindset to have if you're ASU. And I mean, a lot of college teams have that, but like, I like that that's being instilled. And I like that Levitt likes being the underdog and all that. And I mean, this team will always be the team that got picked 16th in the preseason poll, right? Like
100%.
That. So you always have that. And I mean, I'm sure that there was going to be people picking BYU to win this game too. So it's not like there's some huge, favorite. So, yeah. And one thing that we didn't mention actually, but I know we just gave the ending, but ASU beat Kansas State when the Wildcats were coming off a bye week. I think that's an important thing to point out. Like that's a pretty good, and they like, it's not like ASU like snuck up on Kansas State. Like no, Kansas State was prepared for that game. Their fans came out in full force. They went with their best, like they gave ASU a good shot in that game. It wasn't ASU didn't sneak up on them or catch them overlooking them. So
for sure,
again, it could all still end to a loss to BYU, but I think we both see this game being as a competitive game coming down to the wire. Some defensive moments will be had, and should be fun no matter what. And I will see you on Mill at some point on Saturday, my good friend.
That will definitely happen. And if you're one of our 5 listeners who just so happens to also be on Mill, I guess my face hasn't been on here in a while, but if you remember what I look like, come say hi.
For sure. All right. Please like and subscribe, rate and review, follow the College Huddle on socials, and as always, go Sun Devils, baby. Let's get to 9-2.